The golden glow from the streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. The world outside had settled into a quiet lull, but inside, Jungkook was anything but calm. You were still asleep, your breath slow and steady, your delicate features relaxed in peaceful slumber. Your hands rested beside your head, fingers lightly curled, your lips slightly parted, as if lost in a dream. And there he was, your husband, seated on the floor beside the bed, chin rested against his palm, watching you with a mix of patience and helplessness. Jungkook sighed. He had been waiting for hours. Dinner was ready, the table set, everything prepared. But he refused to wake you. He wanted you to rest. He wanted you to wake up naturally, so he waited. At first, he tried to distract himself, checking emails, answering a few texts, even doing push-ups in the corner to pass the time. But eventually, he found himself right back where he started, drawn to you like a magnet. This time, he was closer, lying beside you, but keeping a respectable distance. His body tilted off the bed, legs hanging off the side. His head was mere inches from yours, his dark eyes tracing the contours of your face, committing every detail to memory. His fingers, as if acting on their own, reached for yours, lightly brushing against your pinky. Without thinking, he held onto it. Jungkook sighed again, softer this time. Jungkook, Yin. He whispered your name so softly, not even he could hear it. How could you? He bit his lip, gathering a little more courage. Jungkook, Yin, wake up, dinner's waiting for you. Still nothing. You remained completely still, lost in deep sleep, completely unaware of the restless man beside you. Jungkook exhaled through his nose, his lips forming a small pout. His patience was wearing thin. If only he could just pull you close, press tiny kisses along your jaw, whisper against your skin until you stirred awake. But he didn't dare. Would you be okay with that? Would you feel uncomfortable? The uncertainty gnawed at him, so instead, he stayed still, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with yours, tracing invisible patterns on your palm. The sensation made you conscious then. You shifted, a barely noticeable movement, but Jungkook felt it like a shockwave. His heart leaped as he watched you stretch slightly, your breathing changing, your lips parting just a little more. You were waking up, finally. But then, realization crashed into him like a tidal wave. He was right beside you. What if you opened your eyes and found him this close? What if you were startled? What if you pulled away? Before he could think, before he could rationalize his actions, Jungkook panicked. Shit. He jumped off the bed so fast it was almost comical, his heart hammering in his chest. Now standing at the edge, he shoved his hands into the pockets of his sweatpants, pretending to be completely casual about the situation, as if he hadn't just been lying beside you, as if he hadn't just spent the last hour admiring your sleeping face, as if his pulse wasn't racing. Your lashes fluttered as you stirred once more, a small sigh escaping your lips as you slowly opened your eyes. Jungkook held his breath. Would you say something? Would you notice? Would you ask why he looked so flustered? Or worse, would you wish he had stayed? You blinked a few times, your vision still hazy from sleep, as your eyes darted around the dimly lit room. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast a warm light over everything, making the space feel even quieter, almost peaceful. But then, your gaze landed on a figure standing stiffly at the edge of the bed. Jungkook, you tilted your head slightly, your brows furrowing in confusion as you tried to make sense of why he was standing there like that. His posture was awkward, his hands were tucked into the pockets of his sweatpants, his shoulders slightly hunched, and there was an unmistakable hesitance in his expression. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but then he just stood there, his dark eyes studying you carefully, waiting. Jungkook, let's eat dinner, Yin. He finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost unsure. You frowned, noticing his odd behavior. He looked almost shy. Without saying a word, you lifted your hand toward him, silently inviting him to sit beside you. Jungkook's eyes widened just a fraction, caught off guard by your small gesture. His lips twitched, and before you knew it, a genuine smile stretched across his face, soft, boyish, filled with something tender. He moved cautiously, as if afraid he'd do something wrong, but he didn't hesitate this time. Slowly, he lowered himself onto the bed, settling beside you. The warmth of his presence was immediate, a comforting contrast against the cool air of the room. You turned slightly toward him, your lips pressing together in a small, sleepy smile. Jungkook's heart swelled at the sight. It was such a simple thing, but to him, it felt new. It felt like progress. A quiet chuckle left his lips before he reached for your outstretched hand, taking it into his own. His grip was warm and secure, as if reassuring both you and himself that he was right here. Without a word, he leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to your shoulder. His lips lingered for just a second longer than necessary, and when he pulled away, his voice came out in a low whisper. "Jungkook, did you sleep well?" You gave a small nod, your eyelids fluttering shut as his fingers unexpectedly brushed through your hair. The gentle touch sent a subtle shiver through your body, making your breath hitch for just a second. Jungkook noticed, his thumb traced over your brow, his other hand holding yours against his cheek, his warmth seeping into your skin. "Jungkook, you look so comfortable," he murmured, his voice laced with something soft, something affectionate. "Wait here. I'll bring your food here, okay?" You blinked up at him, taking in the way he looked at you. You gave him a slow, appreciative nod, silently acknowledging his thoughtfulness. He returned the nod, flashing you a reassuring smile before pulling away and heading toward the kitchen. The room fell into silence once more. Minutes later, the door creaked open again, and Jungkook stepped inside, balancing a tray full of neatly arranged dishes. The sight made your brows lift in surprise. He had prepared everything so meticulously, with care in every detail. As he walked toward the bed, his eyes landed on you, resting against the headboard. Now curled up under the blanket, the covers pulled all the way up to your shoulders. He let out a quiet chuckle. "Jungkook, looks like someone doesn't want to leave the bed," he teased, setting the tray down in front of you. Your mouth fell open slightly as you took in the sheer variety of dishes he had prepared. Your stomach gave a quiet grumble. Betraying you, you quickly pressed your lips together, pretending you hadn't heard it. But Jungkook definitely did. He bit back a grin. "Yin, when did you even cook all of this?" you asked, your voice still hoarse from sleep. Jungkook felt his breath catch for a second at the sound of your voice. It was soft, sleepy, childlike, so different from the usual guarded way you spoke to him. He forced himself to focus, swallowing down the way his heart reacted. "Jungkook, when you were sleeping," he answered smoothly, reaching out to adjust the plates, making sure everything was within your reach. But then he hesitated. You still hadn't moved. Your hands were tucked inside the blanket, your body comfortably nestled under the warmth, and he could tell you weren't planning on moving anytime soon. Jungkook pursed his lips. Should he feed you? The thought sent a wave of hesitation through him. Would it be too much? Would you pull away? This morning, you barely acknowledged the food he made. If he tried to feed you now, would you let him? His fingers tightened around the spoon for a brief second before he exhaled, shaking the doubt away. "If I don't try now, how will she ever get comfortable with me?" With that thought in mind, he slowly scooped up a bite of food, lifting the spoon toward you. He hesitated for just a second before softly saying, "Jungkook, here, try this." His fingers trembling slightly, but he ignored it, focusing entirely on your reaction. A tiny smile tugged at your lips before you opened your mouth, letting him feed you without hesitation. His breath hitched. This was new. This was progress. His dark eyes gleamed with something unreadable, his heart swelling with a quiet sense of victory. Step by step, he told himself, "I can make her comfortable with me." "Jungkook, how is it?" he asked, voice hesitant yet hopeful, watching for the slightest reaction. You swallowed, the warmth of the food spreading through you. But the familiar question struck a chord deep inside you. It pulled you back to your birthday, to the way he had asked you the same thing while cutting your cake, the way you had brushed him off so easily. A quiet sigh escaped your lips. "Yin, it's delicious, Jungkook," you admitted, your voice softer than before. The instant smile that bloomed on his face made your heart clench. His entire expression brightened, like a child who had just been praised for something he worked hard on. The simple joy in his features made something stir inside you, something warm and unfamiliar. You tilted your head slightly, watching him. An odd sense of guilt settled in your chest. You felt the need to say more, "Yin," and you hesitated before continuing. The cake was really good too. Jungkook's fingers stiffened around the spoon, his expression faltering for a split second as his eyes flickered with uncertainty. He looked at you carefully, as if trying to make sure he heard you right. "Jungkook, really?" he murmured, his voice quieter now, almost careful. You nodded. Yin, really, it was. He exhaled sharply, nodding as he swallowed down a wave of emotions. You watched as he lowered his gaze slightly, his ears tinged pink. It was clear he wasn't used to receiving such words from you. He felt embarrassed because he knew baking a cake for you was the bare minimum. He should have done more. He wanted to do more. Jungkook, thank you, he finally said, his voice laced with something deep, something vulnerable. I'll make you an even better one next time. A small chuckle escaped you as you took another bite, letting him feed you again. For the first time in a long time, you felt at ease. You sat comfortably, the warmth of his presence wrapping around you like a blanket, while he took care of you in a way no one ever had before. And just like that, the conversation grew. Jungkook started talking more, his voice losing its hesitation, his words flowing more easily. He told you small things, about his childhood, about how he used to cook for himself when he lived alone, about the dishes his mother used to make for him. He told you how he had never really cooked for anyone else before, that he never cared enough to try. You listened, and for once, you didn't feel the urge to shut yourself away. You shared things too, small, insignificant memories from your past. Little things you never thought you'd talk about again. You spoke about the places you like to visit, the things you used to do when you were younger, how you would sneak out late at night just to walk alone in the quiet streets. Jungkook listened intently, his eyes never leaving yours. You laughed, you talked. The room felt warmer, the silence between you comfortable instead of suffocating. For the first time, the walls between you both seemed thinner, almost see-through. But then, just as the food was about to finish, Jungkook suddenly stopped. His chopsticks hovered mid-air, his fingers tightening slightly as a flicker of hesitation crossed his face. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, clearly debating something. Then, he finally spoke. Jungkook, Yin. His voice was quiet, careful. Have you ever thought about confronting your father about this? His eyes locked onto yours. It's not something small. Your hand froze mid-motion, your fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the blanket, your entire body stilling. A sharp silence filled the space between you, thick and heavy. Then, slowly, you lifted your gaze to meet his. There was no anger in your eyes, no resentment, just quiet exhaustion. Yin, Jungkook, you sighed, shaking your head. What's the point of making someone realize something when deep down, they never wanted to? Jungkook didn't respond. He just watched you, his expression unreadable. It was his choice to treat me like that, you continued, your voice steady. It was his choice to act like I didn't exist. I did what I could. I tried to be enough, and then I stopped. Yin, you know, he never even tried to know me, you said, your lips curling into a bitter smile. And if I went to him now, told him everything I went through, he'd probably feel a moment of guilt. He'd say, oh, I shouldn't have left my daughter alone. I should have been there. But what's the point of that guilt? It won't change anything. He was never a part of my life, and I don't want him to be now either. Jungkook's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his chopsticks. He understood. He hated that he understood. Yin. So, just let it be. You exhaled, the weight in your voice undeniable. Why should I cry more? Why should I beg for something I never had? I don't want to anymore. Jungkook lowered his gaze. His heart ached, not because of your words, but because of how much pain was hidden behind them. Jungkook took a deep breath, his emotions pressing heavily against his chest. He couldn't hold back anymore. Without hesitation, he pushed the plates aside and leaned forward, wrapping his strong arms around you. His sudden embrace caught you off guard, but before you could react, he gently buried your face against his chest. His grip was warm, secure, like he was shielding you from the world itself. His fingers threaded through your hair, his palm cradling the back of your head, and his lips parted as he whispered against your crown, his voice deep, yet filled with a tenderness that made your heart ache. Jungkook, I'm proud of you, Yin, and no matter what, I always will be. Your breath hitched. His words, so simple yet so powerful, sent a strange warmth spreading through your chest. Your fingers twitched against the blanket as you processed them, and then, slowly, hesitantly, you lifted your arms. For a moment, you wavered. Then, finally, you wrapped them tightly around him, clutching onto his shirt as if he was the only thing in the world. And just like that, time seemed to slow. The silence between you wasn't heavy, it was comforting. The rhythmic sound of his heartbeat against your ear, the way his fingers ran through your hair absent-mindedly, the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, it was unfamiliar, yet it felt right. You didn't know how long you stayed like that, but eventually, Jungkook pulled back slightly, just enough to look at you. His arms still held you, his grip unwavering. His dark brown eyes locked onto yours, and the intensity in them made your stomach flutter unexpectedly. He hesitated for a moment before softly saying, "Jungkook, Yin, I have something to show you." You blinked, still dazed from the hug. "Wait here," he murmured. Then, just as suddenly as he had embraced you, he leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to your forehead. His lips remained there for a second longer than necessary before he pulled away, his warmth leaving too soon. Before you could say anything, he stood up and rushed out of the room, leaving you sitting there, completely thrown off balance. You blinked at the empty space where he had just been. Something inside you stirred, a strange sensation you couldn't quite place. It wasn't just curiosity about what he wanted to show you. It was something else, something warm, something unfamiliar. Your fingers absent-mindedly brushed over your arms, where his warmth still lingered, and you bit your lip. This was happening too fast, wasn't it? But then again, he was your husband. Was it really wrong to feel this way? Before you could think about it too much, the door creaked open just a little. Your eyes snapped toward it, your anticipation rising. But it barely moved, opening, just a tiny crack. You frowned. Was that him? And then, suddenly, the door swung wide open. Your breath caught in your throat as you saw Jungkook standing in the doorway, barely visible behind a mountain of shopping bags, boxes, and packages. Your jaw dropped. He struggled to maneuver inside, his arms piled so high with items that you could barely see his face. A huff of desperation left his lips as he tried to drag everything in, using his foot to push some bags forward. It took him nearly 5 whole minutes to bring everything inside, one trip after another. By the time he finished, he exhaled heavily, brushing his slightly damp hair back with his fingers. Jungkook stretched his arms out dramatically, his lips curving into a grin as he looked at you. His voice held a playful excitement as he announced, "Jungkook, Tada." Your eyes widened as you took in the sight before you. The entire floor was covered with bags, boxes, and beautifully wrapped gift packages. Some were stacked neatly, while others were casually placed around, as if he had hurried to bring everything in. You could see luxury shopping bags, smaller delicate boxes that looked like jewelry cases, and even a few large boxes with brand logos you recognized instantly. For a long moment, your brain refused to process what was happening. Was this, for you? Your breath hitched, your fingers tightening around the blanket as you stared at the overwhelming sight. Then, as reality slowly sank in, you quickly jumped off the bed, your voice coming out in disbelief. "Yin, Jungkook, what is all this?" He stood in front of you, his hands shoved into his pockets as he shrugged, his lips forming a small pout. His expression was a mix of hesitation and smug, as if he wasn't sure how you'd react. "Jungkook, I originally planned to give these to you in the morning," he admitted, glancing away. "But after you rejected the phone, I got you. I thought you'd refuse these too." He sighed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just wanted to calm you down first, to make sure you weren't upset, before giving them to you." Your heart clenched at his words. He had put so much thought into this. He had been worried that you'd push him away again. He had been patient, waiting for the right moment to make sure you felt comfortable before showering you with gifts. Jungkook took a step forward, carefully weaving between the bags until he stood right behind you. His warmth radiated against your back as he leaned in slightly from behind, his voice softer this time. "Jungkook, but now," he whispered, "I finally have the chance to give them to you." Then, in an even gentler tone, he added, "Happy birthday, my Yin." Your heart skipped a beat. You turned your head slightly, looking up at him. His dark brown eyes were filled with warmth, so genuine, so tender, and before you could stop yourself, your body moved on its own. You turned fully and stepped toward him, wrapping your arms around his waist. Jungkook stiffened for just a second, caught off guard by the sudden hug, but then, he let out a quiet breath, his entire body relaxing as his arms instinctively wrapped around you. He held you close, his chin resting on top of your head, his fingers traced soft, absent-minded patterns on your back, his touch light yet firm, as if he wanted to comfort you without overwhelming you. "Yin, thank you," you whispered, your voice barely audible against his chest. Jungkook smiled softly, his arms tightening around you just a little. "Jungkook, this is just a small gift from me," he murmured, "and it's only the beginning." A chuckle escaped your lips as you pulled back slightly, looking up at him. His eyes crinkled as he smiled down at you. his hands coming up to gently cup your cheeks. Jungkook, let's open them up, he said, his voice laced with excitement. And if there's anything you don't like, just tell me. I still don't know all your preferences yet, so I can exchange them if needed. You immediately shook your head. Yin, no way, you huffed, pouting slightly. Then, suddenly, a wave of excitement hit you. Your lips curled into a grin, and you clapped your hands together. Yin, let's open them up. I'm so excited. Jungkook chuckled, ruffling your hair affectionately before kneeling down beside you. Together, you started unwrapping the gifts one by one. Each time you pulled out a new item, a dress, a pair of heels, a delicate piece of jewelry, your eyes sparkled with excitement. You held them up against yourself, twirling in front of the mirror, showing them off to Jungkook. And he just sat back, resting his chin on his palm, watching you with soft, adoring eyes. His heart swelled with every little gasp of surprise, every delighted laugh that escaped your lips. Yin, Jungkook, you seriously have the best taste in gifts, you exclaimed, admiring a beautiful necklace he had picked out. I didn't expect you to be this good at choosing things for girls. Jungkook blinked in surprise, then let out a soft chuckle. Jungkook, really? You nodded eagerly. Yin, yeah, and I love you for that. The words slipped out naturally, without a second thought, but the moment you said them, your breath hitched. The words slipped out naturally, without a second thought, but the moment you said them, your breath hitched. Jungkook froze. You froze. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, a small, knowing smirk tugged at the corners of his lips. His dark eyes flickered with something unreadable, something intense. Jungkook, you love me for that, huh? He murmured, tilting his head slightly. Your cheeks flushed instantly. I mean, not like that. Before you could stammer out an excuse, you quickly pointed toward another unopened box, your voice slightly higher than usual. Yin, oh, let's open that one. Jungkook raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by your sudden attempt to change the subject. A knowing smirk played on his lips, but he didn't push further. Instead, he let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head as he leaned back. Jungkook, all right, let's see what's inside, he said, grabbing the box and placing it in your lap. And just like that, the moment passed, leaving you flustered, overwhelmed, and maybe just a little bit more drawn to him than before. But as you continued opening each gift, sharing laughter and playful teasing, you couldn't shake the thought lingering in the back of your mind. Maybe this birthday wasn't so bad after all. As you looked at Jungkook, who was watching you with that soft, satisfied smile, you realized something. You weren't alone anymore. You had someone who cared, who went out of his way to make you feel special. Someone who wasn't just here for tonight but for all the birthdays to come. It had been months since your marriage, months filled with love, bickering, unexpected tenderness, and slow-growing comfort. The once unfamiliar presence of Jungkook in your life had now become something so normal, so effortless. Lt. Cool night breeze whispered through the balcony, carrying the distant hum of the city below. You and Jungkook were sprawled across the couch, tangled in each other's presence. He lay with his head comfortably resting on your lap, his body relaxed as your fingers gently threaded through his soft hair, massaging his scalp in slow, soothing motions. The laptop in front of you played a movie neither of you had been paying much attention to. It was more about the company than the film itself. The bowl of popcorn sat between you, half-eaten, as Jungkook lazily plucked another piece and held it up to your lips. You took it absent-mindedly, your gaze still on the screen. Jungkook, I think the blonde-haired guy is the criminal, Jungkook murmured, eyes flickering between you and the laptop. You scoffed, chewing as you shook your head. Yin, are you even watching properly? He's obviously the victim. Jungkook hummed in thought before feeding you another piece. Jungkook, no, look at the way they're showing his expressions. He's way too suspicious. You turned slightly to face him, your brows raised. Yin, he's just a sweet guy who got caught up in a mess. There's no way he's the bad guy. Jungkook made a face of exaggerated disbelief. Jungkook, sweet guy? Seriously? He's the most obvious criminal I've ever seen. You rolled your eyes, throwing a piece of popcorn at his chest. Yin, you have terrible judgment. Jungkook smirked, catching the piece and popping it into his mouth. Then, out of nowhere, he blurted, Jungkook, should I dye my hair blonde? Your head snapped down to look at him, utterly horrified. Yin, what? Jungkook, should I dye my hair blonde? He repeated, his expression completely serious this time. Without thinking, you raised your fist and playfully acted like you were about to punch him. His eyes widened in amusement before he quickly ducked, burying his face into your lap with a chuckle. Yin, I love your hair. Dare if you change it, you huffed, your fingers instinctively tightening in his dark strands as if protecting them from an unseen threat. Jungkook, but you just said the guy looks sweet, he mumbled against your lap, his warm breath tickling your skin. You scoffed. Yin, I was talking about his character in the movie, not his hair. Jungkook bit his lip, feeling slightly embarrassed as he turned his attention back to the screen, acting as if he hadn't just made a fool of himself. Jungkook, whatever. He's still the criminal. You shook your head, laughing softly. Yin, Jungkook. But before you could say anything else, the sudden vibration of his phone cut through the peaceful silence. You barely paid attention as he lazily reached for it, his fingers scrolling through the screen without much thought. Then, in an instant, his body went still, his eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, he just stared at the screen, his lips parting as an unreadable emotion flickered across his face. The confirmation email glowed brightly in the dim light. 2 tickets to Paris. Jungkook immediately sat up, his eyes gleaming with mischief, and that familiar smug expression settled onto his face. The sudden retreat from your lap caught you off guard, and you couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. You pouted at him, your fingers lightly patting your lap, urging him to come back. Yin, come back, you said softly, your voice almost a plea as you looked at him. Jungkook's grin only grew wider, and without hesitation, he slid closer to you, his body inching toward yours. But this time, instead of saying anything, he simply held up his phone, a smug but excited smile playing on his lips. You blinked in confusion, then took the phone from his hand, trying to decipher what he was showing you. The moment you saw the screen, your breath caught. Yin, we are going to Paris? Your voice trembled in disbelief, and your heart skipped a beat as you looked at him, eyes wide in shock. Jungkook nodded, his grin widening even more, if that was even possible. Jungkook, it's in 3 days, he said casually, but you could hear the excitement in his voice, as if he had just revealed the most magical secret. Your hand flew to your mouth, your breath catching in your throat. You were overwhelmed with joy and surprise, your excitement barely contained. Without thinking, you clapped your hands together, a wide smile spreading across your face as you jumped slightly in your seat. Yin, thank you, you said, the words spilling out as you tried to express your gratitude. But even that didn't seem enough. A sudden urge to show him how grateful you were overtook you, and without thinking, you leaned forward, your lips brushing his in a soft, quick peck. The moment your lips touched his, everything seemed to freeze for a second. Jungkook went still, his eyes widening in shock, a mixture of surprise and a dancing in his gaze. He hadn't expected you to kiss him, certainly not like this. The simple action, so spontaneous and innocent, was more than enough to send a rush of emotions through both of you. Jungkook stayed frozen, his mind racing, caught in the unexpected tenderness of the moment. His lips tingled from the brief contact, and a strange warmth filled his chest. But before either of you could speak, he raised an eyebrow, his expression still a bit stunned but with a playful edge. Jungkook, did you just kiss me? He asked, his voice low and full of surprise, his eyes locking onto yours with a soft intensity. You felt your cheeks flush with warmth at his words. You had no idea how to respond, your heart pounding in your chest. You were shy, unsure of how to handle this sudden change in the atmosphere. But before you could stammer out a response, Jungkook leaned in, his face inches from yours. His hand moved to rest beside your thigh, just barely grazing your skin, as he looked at you with an almost pleading expression in his eyes. Without saying a word, he nudged your nose lightly with his gaze shifting between your lips and your eyes. The silent plea in his actions was clear. He wanted more. He wanted you to kiss him again. You could feel his desire, his vulnerability in that moment, and something stirred inside you. Your heart raced, but there was a hesitation too, shyness, uncertainty. But you leaned in again, your lips brushing his a second time. This time, it was slower, more deliberate. But just as you were about to pull away, Jungkook's hands shot up to cup your face, pulling you deeper into the kiss. His lips pressed harder against yours, and you could feel his heart racing, matching yours. A shiver ran down his spine as he pulled you closer, his hands sliding to your waist. He lifted you effortlessly onto his lap, and the sudden closeness took your breath away. You gasped softly at the sudden movement, your knees feeling weak beneath you as you settled onto him. His arms wrapped around you, holding you close, and you kissed him back, your hands tangled in his hair, your fingers gripping him as if you never wanted to let go. Everything around you faded, The room, the world, the noise, until it was just the two of you, kissing like it was the only thing that mattered. The warmth between you both was intoxicating, and you felt a rush of emotions you couldn't even put into words. But after a while, your breath grew shallow, and you broke the kiss, leaning your forehead against his in a moment of quiet intimacy. Your eyes fluttered shut as you tried to catch your breath, your chest rising and falling rapidly. Yin, Jungkook, I love you, you whispered, your voice trembling with the weight of your feelings. The words slipped from your mouth without thought, raw and true. Jungkook froze, his entire body going still at your confession. His heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened in shock, his lips parting in disbelief. A slow smile spread across his face, but there was something deeper in his eyes, a tenderness, a vulnerability. Jungkook, you do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. He wanted to hear it again, needed to know it was real. Yin, I do, Jungkook, you replied, your voice breaking slightly with emotion. I truly do. I appreciate everything you've done for me. I appreciate you, your presence in my life. You've changed everything for me, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy I'm married to you. The moment you finished speaking, Jungkook's eyes glistened with unshed tears. His hand trembled as he cupped your face, his thumb brushing over your cheek, wiping away the tears that had begun to form in your eyes. The smile on his lips was soft, full of love, and it took everything in you not to kiss him again. Jungkook, I love you too, Yin, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I love you more than anything, more than I ever thought possible. He leaned in, capturing your lips once more, and the kiss was even more intense than before. His hands tangled in your hair, pulling you closer, as if he wanted to absorb every ounce of you. You kissed him back with all the love you felt for him, your hands on his shoulders, feeling the intensity of his love through the press of his lips. The world around you disappeared, leaving nothing but the sound of your breathing, the soft press of your lips against each other, and the racing of your hearts. You kissed until you were both out of breath, your minds blank, lost in each other. When you finally pulled apart, you rested against him, both of you gasping for air, a shared smile between you as you savored the quiet aftermath. In that moment, everything was perfect. No words were needed. You were right where you were meant to be, together.